Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. Today we chat with Calli from the Ark Education New Zealand, focusing on what it offers to homeschooling families. Connection, communication, creativity. These 3 C's are the foundation for Calli as the Ark Education continues to build a directory for homeschooling resources and support, as well as assistance to educators in schools. Calli has a particular interest in the needs of neurodiverse children and with a personalised service can assist with strategy, planning and, where necessary, referrals. For non-special needs families, there are tutors to help with literacy, etc., and general support for homeschooling needs. Soon, their Drop the School Run 12-week webinar resumes. The course helps parents, grandparents, and extended family members get started in homeschooling. A variety of ideas and approaches to use are encouraged. One of the goals of the Drop the School Run community is to be a cheer squad for new homeschoolers, and I'm all for that. Also discussed are the tensions between experienced homeschoolers and the growing number of new homeschoolers, along with helpful solutions, and the philosophy of doing homeschooling in the best way for your children. Let me welcome you to Coming Home, Calli. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine. I really appreciate the time and the effort, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat.
Me too, because we have had some pre-chat before this and we just had so much to talk about. So I'm very eager for you to be telling me and others more about what you're doing. So let's start. You set up the Ark Education, is that hub? What do you call it?
It's an education platform, a directory and a resource repository, as well as a place that people can come and learn about whatever it is they need to learn about around education. And it started in 2021 when I walked away from my 30-year career, which most of it was actually in learning support as a teacher, and I walked away from my SENCO role at the time. And obviously I was at a loss as to where I'd go next, and after a couple of hours of what the heck am I going to do, it was almost divinely inspired, really. And I say almost, I feel that it was divinely inspired, that I developed a platform or a place where not only people who need some kind of educational guidance or assistance could come, but also that would support the providers of that education. At the time and even now, there were quite a few teachers who are walking away from the profession in terms of the ministry or in terms of the compliance side of education, and who still love to teach and still loved being with the kids, and they were at a loss as to what to do. And many of us had started businesses, if you like, outside of the system. So it was a two-way thing at the time. And 2021 was about the year that a lot of parents and caregivers and families decided that they were going to pull their kids out of school and get into homeschooling, of whatever type, whatever shape or form that they could muster in a hurry, actually, a lot of them. I still feel for these families, and they are, the homeschooling community is growing exponentially at the moment. And it's not only New Zealand. New Zealand seems to be one of the biggest growth nations in homeschoolers, but it's happening all over the world. because the system isn't giving our children what they need. So parents are taking their children out so that they can give them what they need, which is a bit of an indictment on the system, but that's going to have to change. But in the meantime, homeschooling, as I see it, is one of the best options for families who are in a position that their kids are struggling, or their kids just don't fit in, or they want something different for their children. Yeah.
Right. Before I ask you specifically about homeschooling, can you go over what was the need you saw that you couldn't see another system or company filling that led you to start the Ark?
There still isn't really. One place that people can come to find assistance and access education. And when I say education, for me, education is lifelong learning. It's not just math, science, And you've obviously got Google and Facebook and all those places, but you really have to go looking for these people when you want to find them. And I just felt that a platform where you could bring as many and as diverse a range of providers together in a directory, you could then meet as many needs as possible for people who are looking for something, looking for access. Because at the moment, the system is so convoluted and inaccessible, really. For me, that was one of the biggest reasons why I found it untenable to remain in it in any entrenched way, if that makes sense. I am still in it in that I do some class work, but that's more to keep a roof over my head at the moment than it is because that's where my heart is. If that makes any sense at all. Yeah.
You say the system is inaccessible, so that's part of your motivation for opening up the Ark. What is it that is inaccessible, and then on the contra to that, how are you filling that gap and becoming an educational hub that is accessible?
I experienced a lot of frustration and incompetence in many cases around supporting students with their learning. And all students at some stage in their school life and their academic life need some kind of support. And particularly neurodiverse kids, there are little to no pathways or funding options or anything like that to support them.
Can I ask a quick question? SENCO, what's that an acronym for?
Okay, SENCO is Special Educational Needs Coordinator.
Okay, thank you.
Basically, coordinate all the learning needs that are in a school. So we're liaising with outside agencies, we're helping teachers identify problems and solve them at a second tier, what we call a second tier level, which means that we work within the school to help that child. If that child doesn't respond to what we've provided, then it goes to an outside agency. First of all, to access that provision, what little provision there is an unbelievably convoluted and indirect process, and the funding just isn't there for the need, to be honest.
Is that what you mean about being inaccessible, that the need's there?
Inaccessible. Yeah, but then that's at that level. And even in the classroom, to be honest, for a lot of kids in a lot of classrooms, learning is inaccessible because it's not tailor-made in the most part, it often, and I'm grossly generalizing here, often the stress and the pressure of compliance and the curriculum and all that makes the teacher less responsive to needs and to individual children in the moment. It's not their fault at all, having 2 kids or 3 kids or even 4 kids in a group, but when you've got 27, things start getting a little less personal, quite a lot less personal, and so that whole accessibility to education, and even at the classroom level, as needs get higher, the accessibility gets worse. I really see the Ark as being a possible model, like open source accessibility for people who have a need. A system could take over something, a model like the Ark Education, and it would cut bureaucracy down to just about nothing, and it would allow for much more targeted assistance, and funding could be channeled towards what's really needed. Considering that only a third of our education budget actually goes to schools, to the chalk face. Yeah, you start realizing how big the machine is and how the machine is functioning for the machine rather than for what it's been built for. If that analogy makes sense.
Oh yes, yeah. It does. Very much. Yeah. So let's say a homeschooling families have come across you, and I have heard some interviews that Marie from Reality Check Radio has done with you, and so now they know you're there and they are a homeschooling family, so they come to your website. What are they looking for, and what is there for them no matter what their homeschooling approach? How do you start funneling them into what they need?
At the moment, because we're still relatively new, we're still building the directory, and that's been my big push the last 18 months, because actually that's how long we've been going. But I've had a lot of homeschooling families contact me, actually most of them around learning support, because they're struggling with something or another, whether it be dyslexia, or I had someone contact me with a child with Tourette's and things like that. And I always make it my business to make sure that they leave with some strategy or some way to go, or with a plan. If there's nobody that I can refer them to in their area or whatever, I will go out and find that person for them. I have a lot of expertise around literacy support, especially for neurodiverse kids. Being dyslexic myself, that's always been a really strong interest for me. So basically, if you come to me looking for somebody to do this, blah, 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 or I need help with this, blah, 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 at the moment, I can either refer you to somebody who is on the directory, and you can go and have a look at the directory, but if you can't find anyone, the next step is to get hold of me. I'll find out whatever needs to be found out. And I've recently got a couple of other people who are coming on board who will also be helping me, which is fantastic news, because, little old me, I can't cover as much as I'd really like to.
You have your limits.
We do have exemption process or exemption page where there are people that they can contact, because I'm not really an expert at it. I have applied for a couple of exemptions for people and they have got them eventually, but that's not where my heart is. But these links to a couple of people on the website who are more than happy to help with exemptions, and other useful links with the exemption form and links to the national homeschooling website and things.
So families that have got special challenges with their children, neurodiverse, dyslexia, etc., that is wonderful news that there is a hub there to go to just go, help, what do I do next? And with your experience too. If you are a homeschooling family and you don't have these challenges, how can Ark Education assist the homeschool families in that?
we're taking on quite a few tutors and things like that. So I know some homeschool families struggle with certain parts of the curriculum, and particularly reading and literacy. I think a lot of home educators feel like they don't have the knowledge, I guess, to teach reading, which I don't particularly subscribe to. I think they do have the knowledge and that they can easily acquire the knowledge that they need. And we're also working on that side of home education and educating the educators themselves, the parents and the grandparents and whoever's taking on the teaching role at home. At the moment we're doing a few webinars every now and again, but we're hoping to relaunch our 12-week course in 2024. In the directory itself, you can go and have a look. There's categories. One of the categories is curriculum support and homeschooling, and there are quite a few profiles in there at the moment, especially for New Zealand. I'm very keen to start onboarding people who have particular curriculums. If somebody has an inquiry about whatever it is, I'm also really happy to go and do some research.
And then it becomes a resource that you can add into your hub there. So
absolutely. And it's a useful resource then, because somebody is going to use it.
I find it interesting that you've mentioned that parents, or maybe the grandparents or caregivers, would hesitate to homeschool their families because they don't feel that they're good enough or clever enough, or what, I don't know what arbitrary scale they would begin to measure themselves on. But I do remember back in the beginning, before we brought our two eldest children home, was that I had always assumed that teachers were part of this expert field that a parent could never ever attain to. And while I don't mean to undermine the calling of a teacher, I think it's totally erroneous to assume that when your child turns 5 you're no longer capable and you've got to pass them over to this expert. You are totally capable. And I think one of the purposes I have in what I do is not only the basics of how-to and resourcing, but it's the giving of confidence. I will often say to a parent who expresses this, or I don't know that I could, I say, well, did you potty train your child? Well, yes. Great. There's very little you can't teach them then.
Exactly. You can't be too bad a teacher then. Exactly. Teachers are born. They're not made. And if you have an absolute love for your kids and you want them to learn, nobody wants them to learn like you do. Let's face it, not even their teacher, really, because, the teacher's got 27 kids that she or he wants to learn, and they don't have that same connection. They're never going to have that same connection as you do with your own children. As long as that connection is there and there is a want for your children to learn, you will find a way. You will find a way, and that way is normally the way that your children need. If you get something wrong, if it doesn't work, who cares? Try something else. It's not like it's a ticking bomb. In the classroom, it is kind of a ticking bomb because, you've got all these compliance issues that you have to comply with. What level is the child at? Oh my goodness, they're 2 years behind. And there's all this pressure, which is arbitrary because the child is where they are. What are you going to do about it? The only thing that you really need to do, in my opinion, is to support that child to develop their potential, not somebody else's perception of their potential. And at home, there's no better place. You can do that, but you can do that. They don't have to fit in with anything, or the program fits in with them, not the other way around.
That notion, I think as a parent, you have to de-school yourself, peel back those layers that we have presumed and been told that this is the way it's done, which can actually take some time. So let's say they've got some growing confidence, but a parent or a caregiver needs some equipping. And I've dropped the school run heading into webinars and a 12-week course. That sounds like that's a really helpful thing to publicise, and because sometimes that's all you need. You just need to know that you can do this. So go and do the course.
Absolutely. When we designed the course, it wasn't to tell homeschoolers how to do what they need to do. It was designed to put forward a variety of ideas and a variety of approaches. They could possibly work those into their school day, so to speak, or their learning day with their children, and get support in a bit of a cheer squad, really. That's one of the biggest reasons why we dropped the school run together, because we're hoping that we can develop a community that is a cheer squad for people. You know, I feel we need to support anyone who really wants to learn. It doesn't matter why or how they've come to it. It's an interesting space to be in when you are offering a course, because we didn't want to come across as the experts telling you how to do it, because you know your kids better than we know your kids. And that one of the biggest problems about school is that the inflexibility of pedagogy and structured literacy is the way to go. And then, no, structured literacy is not the way to go. It's now whole language learning, you know, and the pendulum swings from one to the other and vilifies the one when it's on the side, you know. It's ridiculous. But if you are working at home with your child, you can use whatever it takes, whether it is structured literacy or whether it's whole language or whether it's Davis techniques or whatever it is, whatever works for your kids, you can do. And you can even make it up as you go along. You know? What works, works. If it doesn't work, then you try something different. My vision is that we would become a place where homeschooling families could come and feel comfortable enough to put their hand up and say, oh, this isn't working, I need help, or I'm not actually sure where to go, which direction to go now, and I need help, and we'd be there. We'd be able to supply something for them to be able to carry on with their learning journeys.
That's a very kind of primary need being met, isn't it? And yet it doesn't take long for differences to come up or expectations not to be met. So let's just go back just a little bit to when you were referring to the older experienced homeschoolers that have been doing it for a long time, and some of the newer ones who have come in. And I only know a small amount about it, but I did do a response in an earlier podcast. It was about maintaining behaviour within the homeschool community, and I will link that podcast below if it's pertinent to some listeners who need to know about that. What was happening was that because the whole landscape of homeschooling had changed, not only because parents were getting more and more unhappy with what the public system was offering, or the state, I should say, yes, but also COVID just dropped this huge, rock into the water, and the ripples are still being felt. And everybody suddenly had to cope with that. So, for instance, During the time when we homeschooled, we would often welcome in individuals who had left the school system for whatever reason. And if there were any behavioural issues that they brought into the group, it wasn't really an issue because the bulk of the group that was there helped this usually one or two individuals relearn what they had to do or behave in order to be able to integrate successfully into that group. And now the situation was that it wasn't just one or two, it was this big group, and they were wanting to join and it was causing disruption. Well, that's the facts of it. There's no point trying to say, well, everybody's got to learn to get on. We've now got a problem that we potentially need solutions for. You did mention earlier this isn't just a New Zealand phenomena that we are witnessing. Can you speak to that, please, Calli, and just maybe some examples and maybe some practical solutions that you have either seen implemented to cope with that disruption or what you think could be helpful?
All behaviour is backed by an emotional state. The behaviour of these children that are coming in is a stress response. When children are stressed, they do not behave well and they find it very difficult to connect. And what are you trying to do when you come into a group? You're trying to build a connection. But if the emotional state of any one child really isn't such that they are able to connect, you are going to get bad behaviour. And that's in the classroom, that's in any social group, anywhere you go, all behaviour is connected to an emotion. I feel it would be a really fruitful exercise for when new families are going into a new group, that they sit down and they talk to their child about where they're going, number one, who they're going to do there, and why they're going there. How would you like a friend to behave towards you? And actually teach them how to connect. Because so many of our children have left the classroom because they're stressed. It's not working for them. And under that stressful environment, they cannot learn to connect with other kids. A lot of it is learned behaviour. They've learned to protect themselves, so to speak, by misbehaving or being belligerent. That's because they're stressed. They're not confident about who they are and where they're at. Perhaps that homeschooling group could support that family by saying, we'd really appreciate it if you spoke to your child about why they're coming here, and we're here to connect. We're not monsters. We're not going to hurt you. Or if they are shy or stressed, that maybe they could give an indication of being that way, so maybe say even a safe word, or maybe they can come and sit with their parents for a little while before they feel comfortable going back into the group, or they need to work on strategies together, not expecting a new family coming in to know exactly how it works and the expectations straight away. I think there's expectations and gaps on both sides of the fence, if that makes any sense. But if they could come together before they actually come together and talk about what the expectations are on both sides, right, and come to a place where they can work together to support all their children, not just their own children, the group's children. That would be a really good strategy, I think, to try and mitigate those behaviour issues.
It's like an orientation process, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. People need to take the time to do that. And also remember what it was like when you first started homeschooling. You've got to remember that too, that a lot of these newbies, if you like, these new families, probably nervous as hell as well, because they don't really know what they're doing. Who does, really? I mean, even teachers don't really know what they're doing all the time. I can tell you that. Because every day is different and every child's different, you know. I think it's about actually developing that connection between the adults before you even connect between the kids. And then people can make informed choices too. It might not be the group for them, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of homeschooling. You can choose who you want to be with and where you want to go.
It would be a shame to see infighting developing and to realise that there is change happening. I think the more veteran experienced homeschoolers probably do need to realise that you can't just let this go. They're not just all going to assimilate. And because of the sheer number, if you're afraid that you're going to lose what you have worked so hard to get, then like you say, there needs to be some, good communication. So what do you think of the notion of making it clear as part of the orientation process that the philosophy or the standards or the expectations of the group, in fairness to the interested new families, are made clear? Because if, let's say, for instance, you've got a group that is more of the life structure that the parent actually is in charge. So their parenting style, I'm not saying it's authoritarian, it's not that at all, but it's just that the children know that there are guidelines and consequences. And then you've got some of the more philosophies, the world views that would say, well, parenting's are more of their friends and we need to let them be free to just, you're going to get a major clash in a group.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying, not all groups are going to be for you. So it's best to be informed about what you're getting into or who's coming in. Both philosophies are neither wrong nor right. They just are what they are. They're just different. So I think that's one of the biggest lies, I guess, that we've been told through life is that the opposite of what we do is wrong. It's not. It's just different. But if you can find people who you resonate with and who have similar ideas and things, that's great. It makes it's the essence of group work, And if that's not the group for you, there will be somebody else around. And if there isn't, start one of your own. Start one of your own groups. Find people who are like-minded and do the things that you love to do. You don't have to comply with nothing when you're homeschooling. It's unlimited, it's boundless. It's really exciting. If you think about it, the reason why people want to homeschool their kids is because they love them. If we can connect at that level, then all the rest actually just falls away. It's superfluous. My philosophy around education revolves around three things. The first one is connection, because no man is an island. Whether you like to think you are or not, you have to have a connection somewhere. It doesn't even have to be with other people, it could be yourself. Connection is number one. And the second one is communication, which we've just been talking about. Have to learn to communicate. And the third one is creativity. So if you can't find a group, create your own. And if we can inculcate those three things in our children, that's all they need for life.
I think that's a really good way to round up that area of that we've just talked about with the conflict and some of the things that we don't really like to even talk about. But I don't want to pretend that homeschoolers don't have black days or their own share of difficulties or personality clashes. So let's get some of the troubles that are there so that it can be acknowledged and they can set about trying to solve however these are.
Exactly.
Can I please ask you your opinion on how you would work out the following thought, and that is that homeschoolers are in a unique position to curate a curriculum according to their children's abilities and interests without compromising the basics. Bearing that in mind, how can you help fast track or even bypass traditional educational expectations?
It takes a paradigm shift, basically. It takes a total paradigm shift. And like we were saying before, a lot of parents feel that they're not experts. And when you don't feel you know something or you feel like you are inadequate, go to what you know. And what we know is what we've experienced. So, you know, unless they were homeschooled themselves, parents always go back to school. They will find textbooks and anything that they can pin their hopes on, basically, to teach their children. Homeschool is an opportunity to drop all of that, because what we really need to realize is that if you're homeschooling, you can do it the way your kids want to do it. There's no right or wrong way. I totally get that you've got to teach reading. You can do that in a really sort of natural way. You know, reading to your kids, playing games with your kids. You know, you've got all the mechanical stuff like learning the letter names and things like that. But parents know how to do that. We all know how to do that. But make it natural and enjoyable. You know, if you are struggling to think of ways to teach your children reading and maths and things like that, there are plenty, absolutely a plethora of YouTube channels, and you know, there's so much out there these days on the internet. And there's me as well, you know, and I actually have worked with young homeschooling families before, where I've gone in for a few weeks and actually worked with them, but worked with the parents rather than the kids, and put together activities and showed them stuff that they could possibly do. And all it's taken is like 8 to 10 weeks, and they're off. They don't need me anymore. That is the whole direction I'm going in, because when it comes to a curriculum, in the exemption process, you do have to show that you have got a plan. Otherwise, you end up muddling around in a puddle for the rest of your time with your children. But don't feel that it has to be school, because the reason why you're not at school is because you don't want to be at school. You know, you don't want your children to be in that environment. So
that's so freeing, Calli, because once you pass that back to the parent and say, you're the expert on your child, everything comes from that. You don't need to know everything before you start.
We wouldn't be born and be living this life, would we? If we knew everything. That's why we're here on this earth, you know, we're learning. Yes. And everybody's learning. Your kids are learning, you're learning, and we're learning all the time. And that's what the Ark is.
Oh, it's so encouraging to hear all that. What's your opinion, Calli, on when you're putting together curriculum and planning for your school at home educating, what life skills and crafts do you think are really important, and what do you think perhaps could be secondary?
Life skills are very much circumstantial. Somebody who has servants and lives the life of Riley, so to speak, doesn't need to learn to wash dishes and do all those sorts of things. We all need to be able to take responsibility for what we're creating. So I would say that the essential life skill is to make a child, or not make them, teach them. It sounds like you bash them over the head or something to make them do something. But you encourage and teach a child to take responsibility for what they're creating in their life, as in, like you said before, certain behaviors are going to bring circumstances and things like that and consequences. So one of the biggest life skill, if not the biggest life skill, is to get a child to connect with themselves, be able to self-regulate, be able to say, hey, hang on, I'm feeling really angry now, and instead of punching my baby brother in the head, I'm going to go to my room and scream in the pillow or kick the bed or whatever, giving them those skills, those regulating skills, the ability to see when they are needing something, that is the most important life skill. And then after that is the other things, like being able to connect with the earth, growing stuff, taking care of animals, their brother and sister, all those sorts of things. And that takes connection, doesn't it? And communication. And also cooking. Everything in the end is actually about teaching kids to connect. If a child can actually grow vegetables and then bring it into the kitchen and cook it and with love and share it with the family, it's just a really beautiful, holistic thing. In the end, it's all about that initial connection.
Listening to you talk about that for the last little while makes me see very clearly that in your mind there isn't really a definitive line between like official education and everything else that happens. It's very fluid. And then the other thing that I'm thinking of too is that you've identified that the most important part is, well, I see it kind of like as building the child's character. Because if you've making sure they know their phonics and they know their times table and the periodic table, if that's your focus, but you're neglecting your 3 C's, all you're really going to end up with are clever little devils.
Absolutely. And to be honest, Christine, the periodic table and all that, we've got full access of that with technology today. I am very much an advocate for using technology as a tool because a lot of people shy away from it and demonize it and have vilified it. But if we do that, what we're doing is giving it the power. We're actually giving away our human power of being able to use it as a tool to help us in our learning, and we're giving that power to technology, which to me is really frightening. If we've built our children's character, as you say, if they're fully connected, if they're communicating and they're being creative, then technology would be just a tool for them rather than their whole world, which it has become for a lot of kids because they're not connected to anything else. And they're not conspiracy theories because they're real, they're very real, that whole addictive nature of the screen and everything. I get that. But if a child is connected, they have a life outside of the screen, the life will take over.
I'm just going to make a note there because I think that whole topic is much bigger than what we've got time and the opportunity to do today. And I'm thinking that would be an amazing interview with you by itself to try and figure it all out, what little I know of it really, and then try and help parents form some kind of comfortable pathway because this is not going away.
We can't put the genie back in the bottle at this stage.
No, yeah.
It's only going to get bigger and stronger, really. Yeah. I think us as humanity, we need to become more human to be able to cope. Yeah.
All right, well, before we pull things back in, what else is on your mind after all of the talking that we've done now and in previous times? What else would you like to talk about today?
Ask for help. And I am here if you need help. And hopefully soon we will grow to a point where there'll be a few people here who will help. The directory is growing. It's still small, but we're putting all our effort into trying to create a resource that is really useful for people. But in the meantime, we're still here. And also, I'm not vilifying the public system as such. What I am doing, though, is speaking out because I see what I see. I've noticed what I've noticed, and most people, even in the system, especially teachers and principals and people who are at the chalk face, so to speak, they all know that this system is broken and it has to change. Homeschooling is a great alternative, I feel, for the minute. If we could change the schooling system to a place that was more like homeschool, then people would probably flock back, flock back to the system, so to speak. So, change. It all comes down to change, and for homeschooling families too. That space is changing all the time. We need to respond rather than react.
Thank you for your time today. You've been so generous, and I think what the Ark is doing, I wish there was a resource like that around when we were homeschooling. I just think it's invaluable what you're doing. So please be blessed. Increase.
Indeed. If there's anybody who's listening who thinks, actually we'd like to be promoted and supported in the work we do, please contact me. I'm open for business, so to speak.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Calli. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. It was so lovely to speak with you today.
It is a wonderful asset to homeschooling families that the Ark Education NZ exists. Something like this would have been a real help in our early days. If anything we have talked over today resonates with you, I encourage you to contact Calli. You have many options to choose from to enable your homeschooling life, whether it's the service Calli offers, consulting with me, or other options. There are those ready and able to support you. I am looking forward to welcoming Calli back again on Coming Home Soon. Have a wonderful week with your family.